The morning sun came through the large windows of First National Bank as David Mitchell stood behind his counter. He had worked at this bank for 12 years. He knew every customer who walked through those doors. Or at least he thought he did. It was a Monday morning when he first saw her. A young black woman walked into the bank wearing an expensive-looking coat and carrying a designer handbag. David noticed her right away. She looked around the bank slowly, taking in every detail. She did not get in line. She just stood there and watched. David thought it was strange. Most people came to the bank, did their business, and left. But this woman was different. She walked around the lobby area like she was studying everything. She looked at the teller windows. She looked at the customer service desk. She even looked up at the security cameras. After about 10 minutes, she finally came to his window. She asked him simple questions about account services and business banking. Her voice was calm and professional. But David felt something was off. Why would someone dress so fancy just to ask basic questions? She could have called the bank for that information. The woman thanked him and left. David watched her go, his mind full of questions. The next day, she came back. This time, she wore a different designer outfit. Again, she did not come straight to the counter. She walked around the bank first. She watched how the other tellers worked. She observed how they talked to customers. She even stood near the ATM machines for a while, just looking around. David kept an eye on her the whole time. He noticed she was taking notes on her phone. That made him even more suspicious. Why would a regular customer take notes inside a bank? His mind started racing with possibilities. Maybe she was planning something bad. Maybe she was checking out the bank's security system. When she finally came to a counter, it was not his. She went to Sarah, the teller next to him. David could not hear everything they said, but he watched carefully. The woman asked Sarah questions about daily procedures and how long she had worked there. Sarah seemed happy to answer, smiling and chatting like nothing was wrong. David thought Sarah was being too trusting. After the woman left, David went over to Sarah during their break. "Did you notice anything strange about that woman?" he asked. Sarah looked confused. "What woman?" "The one in the expensive clothes. The one asking all those questions." Sarah shrugged. "She seemed nice. Just asking about our services." "She was here yesterday too," David said. "And she is taking notes on her phone." Sarah did not seem worried. Maybe she's comparing banks. People do that, but David was not convinced. He had a feeling, and his feelings were usually right. Or so he believed. On Wednesday, the woman came back again. This time David was ready. He watched her from the moment she walked in. She wore another professional outfit, this time a blazer and dress pants. She looked like she was going to an important meeting, not just doing regular bank business. She spent almost 30 minutes in the bank that day. She watched the manager help an elderly customer. She observed how the security guard greeted people at the door. She stood near the waiting area and seemed to listen to conversations between staff members. David started writing down notes of his own. He wrote down the time she arrived. He wrote down what she was wearing. He wrote down everything she did and everywhere she went in the bank. During lunch, he told his coworker Robert about his concerns. Robert was older and had worked at the bank even longer than David. "I'm telling you, something is not right," David said. "Regular customers do not act like this." Robert listened carefully. "Have you told the manager?" "Not yet. I want to have more proof first. But she has been here 3 days in a row now." "Maybe you should mention it," Robert suggested. Better safe than sorry, but David wanted to wait. He wanted to catch her doing something clearly wrong. He wanted to be the one who protected the bank from whatever she was planning. On Thursday, the pattern continued. The woman arrived around 10 in the morning. By now, David had started calling her the suspicious woman in his mind. She never used her name when talking to staff. She never did any actual banking transactions. She just observed and asked questions. This time, she talked to 3 different employees. David watched as she asked each one different questions. Questions about their training. Questions about customer complaints. Questions about bank policies. To David, it all seemed very calculated, very planned. She was gathering information, and he was sure it was for a bad reason. In his 12 years at the bank, he had never seen anyone act like this. He started imagining different scenarios. Maybe she was part of a robbery crew. Maybe she was looking for weaknesses in their security. Maybe she was trying to figure out when they had the most cash on hand. All of these thoughts seemed possible to him. By Friday, David had a thick mental file on this woman. She had come to the bank 5 days in a row. Each day she stayed longer. Each day she asked more questions. Each day she took more notes on her phone. Other employees had started to notice her too. During their afternoon break, 3 tellers gathered in the back room. David brought up his concerns again. "That woman has been here every single day this week," he said, "and she is always watching us, always asking questions." Jennifer, a younger teller, spoke up. "I helped her yesterday. She asked me how long I had been working here and if I liked my job. I thought it was a bit personal for a customer." "See?" David said, feeling validated. "It is not normal." But Tom, another coworker, disagreed. "Maybe she is just really interested in banking. Some people are like that." David shook his head. "No, this is different, trust me. Something is going on." He decided he would take action next week. He would document everything more carefully. He would make an official report to the manager. He might even suggest calling security or the police if she kept coming back. In David's mind, he was doing the right thing. He was protecting the bank. He was being vigilant and careful. He was doing his job, but he never stopped to ask himself one important question. Why did he find this woman so suspicious? Was it really her behavior? Or was it something else? Something he did not want to admit even to himself? The woman looked different from most of their customers. She was young. She was black. She dressed better than he expected. She did not fit his idea of what a normal customer should look like. These thoughts stayed hidden in the back of his mind. He did not examine them. He did not question them. Instead, he convinced himself that his concerns were based purely on her actions. He told himself it had nothing to do with who she was or what she looked like. As Friday ended and David went home for the weekend, he felt sure of himself. He had spotted something wrong. Next week, he would prove it. He would show everyone that his instincts were correct. He had no idea how wrong he was. He had no idea that his assumptions would soon turn his whole world upside down. And he definitely had no idea who this woman really was. Monday morning arrived and David was ready. He had spent part of his weekend thinking about the situation. He had even looked up online what banks should watch for in suspicious behavior. Now he felt more certain than ever that something was wrong. The woman walked in at 9:30. David had positioned himself at the counter where he could see the whole lobby. She wore a navy blue suit this time. Her hair was styled perfectly. She carried the same expensive handbag as before. David pulled out a small notebook he had brought from home. He started writing everything down. 9:30 arrival, navy suit, designer bag. Immediately began observing staff. She started on the left side of the bank today, watching the customer service representatives. She stood at a distance but close enough to see and hear interactions. Every few minutes she would look at her phone and type something. David wrote this down too. After 20 minutes, she walked over to the business banking section. She picked up several brochures about business accounts and loan services. Then she sat in the waiting area and read through them carefully. She took photos of some pages with her phone. David felt his suspicions growing stronger. Why would someone photograph bank brochures? You could just take them home. Unless you did not want to be seen taking them. Unless you were trying to hide what you were doing. He showed his notes to Robert during their first break. "Look at this," David said, pointing to his notebook. 6 days now. Same pattern every time. Robert looked at the notes and frowned. "This is pretty detailed. I want to make sure I have everything documented. When I report this, I want to have solid evidence." "You really think she is planning something criminal?" Robert asked. David nodded firmly. "What else could it be? Honest customers do not act like this." Robert did not look completely convinced, but he did not argue either. "Just be careful, David. Make sure you are right about this." But David was already sure. In his mind, all the pieces fit together perfectly. That afternoon, the woman did something new. She asked to speak with the branch manager. David watched as Sarah called the manager over. The woman and the manager talked for about 15 minutes in his office. The door was closed, so David could not hear anything. When she left the manager's office, she walked directly out of the bank without stopping at any counter. David found this very suspicious. Why meet with the manager privately? What were they talking about? Was she complaining about security so she could learn about their systems? He added all of this to his notes. On Tuesday, David arrived at work early. He wanted to be prepared in case the woman came back. He had organized all his observations from the past week. He had dates, times, and detailed descriptions of everything she had done. The woman arrived at 10 o'clock. Today she wore glasses and had her hair pulled back. She looked even more professional than usual. David thought maybe she was trying to change her appearance slightly. Another red flag in his mind. This time she spent a lot of time near the vault area, well as near as customers were allowed to go. She watched as employees went in and out. She seemed to be noting the security procedures. David felt a chill run down his spine. She was definitely checking out the vault. He was sure of it now. This was not innocent curiosity. This was reconnaissance. He decided to talk to Jennifer about what he had observed. Jennifer was young but smart. Maybe she could help him see something he had missed. "I need to show you something," he said during lunch. He opened his notebook and showed her all his notes. Jennifer read through them carefully. Her expression changed from curious to concerned. "This is a lot of detail," she said slowly. "I know. But do you see what I mean? This is not normal customer behavior." Jennifer bit her lip. "Have you thought about other explanations?" "Like what?" "I do not know. Maybe she is doing research for school or writing a paper about banking." David shook his head. "Then why not just say that? Why be so secretive?" Jennifer did not have an answer for that. But something in her expression told David she was not completely on board with his theory. "Just think about it," David said. "If something bad happens and we did not report this, we will feel terrible." That seemed to make Jennifer more worried. She nodded slowly. "Maybe you should talk to the manager." "I will. I just want to have everything perfectly documented first." Over the next 2 days, David became even more focused on watching the woman. He noticed that other staff members were starting to talk about her too. His concerns were spreading through the bank like ripples in water. Tom mentioned that she had asked him about the busiest times of day. "She wanted to know when we had the longest lines and when we were most crowded," he told David. "See?" David said. "She is trying to figure out when the bank is most vulnerable." Sarah reported that the woman had asked about staff schedules. She wanted to know how many people work here and if we have different shifts. Every new piece of information confirmed David's suspicions. He was building a case piece by piece. In his mind, he was like a detective solving a crime before it happened. By Thursday, David had filled almost 10 pages in his notebook. He had timelines. He had patterns. He had quotes from different employees about their interactions with the woman. He noticed she dressed differently each day, but always expensively. He wrote down descriptions of each outfit. He noted that she never wore the same thing twice. To him, this seemed like another sign she was being deliberately careful about her appearance. He also noticed she was always polite. She smiled at people. She said please and thank you. But David thought this might be an act. Bad people could be charming. That was how they got away with things. During the Thursday afternoon break, several employees gathered in the break room. The conversation quickly turned to the mysterious woman. "She was back again today," Sarah said. "That makes 8 days in a row." 9, actually, David corrected. "She was here last Friday, too, before the weekend." "What do you think she wants?" Jennifer asked. David saw his chance. He pulled out his notebook. "I have been tracking everything. Let me show you what I have found." He went through his notes page by page. He explained his theory about her gathering information. He pointed out all the suspicious behaviors. He talked about how she was clearly trying to learn about their security and procedures. Most of the employees listened with growing concern. A few looked uncertain, but no one strongly disagreed with him. "I think we need to report this," David said firmly. "If we wait and something bad happens, it will be our fault." Tom spoke up. "But report what exactly? She has not done anything illegal. She has not threatened anyone. She just asks questions and watches." "That is exactly what someone would do if they were planning a robbery," David argued. "They would not be obvious about it." "Or maybe she is just an unusual customer," Tom suggested. But David was not interested in other explanations anymore. He had invested too much time and energy into his theory. In his mind, the evidence was clear. By Friday, David had decided he would make an official report to the manager on Monday. He wanted to have one more week of observations to make his case even stronger. The woman came in Friday morning as usual. This time she stayed for over an hour. She talked to the security guard about his duties. She asked questions about the alarm system. She wanted to know about emergency procedures. David watched all of this from his counter. He felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. Anxiety because he worried about what she might be planning. Excitement because he felt he was about to expose something big. He did not notice how his behavior had changed over the past 2 weeks. He did not realize how much time he spent watching this one person. He did not see how his suspicions had turned into an obsession. Other employees had started to notice, though. During breaks, some of them talked quietly about how focused David had become on this woman. "He watches her like a hawk," Sarah whispered to Jennifer. "I know. It seems like a bit much," Jennifer whispered back. "Do you really think she is dangerous?" Sarah asked. Jennifer shrugged. "I do not know. But I think David is convinced." What none of them understood was why David was so certain. They did not see that his suspicions were built on more than just the woman's behavior. They were built on assumptions about who she was and what someone like her would be doing in their bank. David thought he was being a good employee. He thought he was protecting the bank and his coworkers. He thought he was using his experience and instincts to spot trouble. But really, he was making judgments based on appearance, based on age, based on race. He would never have watched a middle-aged white man with the same intensity, even if that man did all the same things. These thoughts never crossed David's mind. He saw himself as fair and unbiased. He believed his concerns were purely professional. He believed he would have acted the same way toward anyone who behaved like this woman did. But deep down in a place he did not want to look, the truth was different. As the second week came to an end, David felt ready. He had his evidence. He had his notes. He had testimonies from other employees. On Monday, he would take all of this to the manager. He would make his report official. He went home Friday evening feeling proud of himself. He felt like he had done important work. He thought he would probably be praised for his vigilance and attention to detail. He had no idea that Monday would not go the way he planned. Monday morning felt different to David. He walked into the bank with his notebook in hand, ready to report everything to the manager. But first, he wanted to see if the woman would show up again. If she did, that would be 10 days in a row. Surely the manager would take his concerns seriously then. At 9:45, she walked through the door. David felt his heart beat faster. Today, she wore a gray pantsuit and carried a leather folder along with her usual handbag. She looked like she meant business. But this time, David was not just going to watch. He had decided over the weekend that he needed to take direct action. He needed to confront her and find out what she was really doing. If she gave suspicious answers, he would have even more evidence for his report. The woman started her usual routine, walking slowly through the bank and observing. But David was not going to let her continue this pattern, not today. He stepped out from behind his counter and walked toward her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice firmer than usual. "I need to speak with you." The woman turned to look at him. She seemed a bit surprised but remained calm. "Yes? Can I help you?" "Actually, I need to ask you some questions," David said. He was aware that other customers were nearby, but he did not care. "You have been coming to this bank repeatedly for the past 2 weeks. I have been observing your behavior and I find it concerning." The woman's eyebrows went up slightly. "Concerning?" "Yes. You spend a lot of time watching our staff and taking notes. You ask unusual questions. You have been here almost every day. I need to know what you are really doing here." A few customers had stopped what they were doing. They were watching the exchange with curious expressions. Sarah looked over from her counter with wide eyes. The woman's face remained calm, but there was something in her eyes now. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment. "I am not sure I understand what you are accusing me of," she said quietly. "I am not accusing you of anything yet," David said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I am just asking questions. What is your purpose for being here so often? Why are you taking notes? Why are you asking staff members about procedures and schedules?" "I do not think I need to explain myself to you," the woman said. Her voice was still calm, but there was a slight edge to it now. "Actually, you do," David said. He was feeling more confident now. He believed he had caught her off guard. "As a bank employee, I have a responsibility to report suspicious activity, and your behavior has been very suspicious." The woman took a deep breath. "Suspicious in what way?" "You are gathering information about our security, our procedures, our busy times. You watch our staff constantly. You take notes on everything. Those are not normal customer activities." "And what do you think I am planning to do with this information?" she asked. David hesitated. He did not want to directly accuse her of planning a robbery without more proof. "I think you are gathering intelligence about this bank for purposes that are not legitimate." "Intelligence?" The woman almost smiled, but not in a friendly way. "That is an interesting word choice." "Ma'am, I need to see your identification," David said. "I want to verify who you are and why you are really here." "You want to see my identification?" She seemed genuinely surprised by this request. "Yes. Multiple forms of ID if possible, and I need you to explain yourself." The woman looked at him for a long moment. Several emotions crossed her face. Then she said something that made David even more suspicious. "I would like to speak with your manager." David felt a surge of satisfaction. She was trying to avoid his questions by going over his head. That was exactly what a guilty person would do. "You can speak with the manager after you answer my questions," he said. "This is a security matter." "A security matter?" The woman's voice was harder now. "Based on what, exactly?" "Based on your behavior over the past 2 weeks. Ma'am, I have documented everything. Every visit, every question you have asked, everywhere you have gone in this bank. I have statements from other employees. I have evidence." "Evidence of what?" she asked. "Evidence that you are not here as a legitimate customer. Evidence that you have been conducting surveillance on this bank." By now, several customers were openly staring. Tom had come out from his counter. Sarah had her hand over her mouth. The security guard had moved closer, sensing the tension. The woman's jaw tightened. "I see. And you made all these assumptions about me based on what? My visits to a bank? My questions about banking services?" "No one comes to a bank every day for 2 weeks just to ask questions," David said. "No one spends that much time observing unless they are planning something." "Is that right?" The woman's eyes were steady on his face. "And did you consider any other reasons for my presence here?" "Like what?" David challenged. "That is not your concern right now," she said. "What is concerning is that you have been watching me, tracking me, and now accusing me without any actual evidence of wrongdoing. Did you stop to think that your behavior might be the problem here?" David felt anger rising in his chest. She was trying to turn this around on him. "I am doing my job. I am protecting this bank. By harassing customers, you are not a regular customer." David's voice got louder. "Regular customers do not act like you do." The woman stared at him. "And how exactly do I act?" "You know exactly what I mean. You do not fit the profile." "Profile?" The woman's voice dropped dangerously low. "What profile is that?" David realized he might have said too much. He tried to recover. "The profile of a normal customer, someone who comes in, does their banking, and leaves. And you think I do not look like someone who belongs in a bank?" "I did not say that, but you implied it. Tell me, why exactly did I catch your attention? Was it my questions? Or was it something else?" David felt defensive now. "This has nothing to do with anything except your suspicious behavior." "Right," the woman said. "My suspicious behavior. The behavior of coming to a bank, asking questions and observing. Things that anyone could do. But for some reason when I do it, it is suspicious." "You are twisting my words." "No, I am understanding them perfectly." The woman looked around at the gathered crowd. Then she looked back at David. "I am going to ask you one more time. I want to speak with your manager. Now. And I told you, you need to explain yourself to me first." The woman pulled out her phone. "Fine. If you will not get the manager, I will call him myself." "Ma'am, you cannot just—" But she had already started dialing. David felt frustrated. This was not going the way he had planned. He had expected her to get nervous, maybe to make excuses, perhaps even to admit she was up to something. Instead, she was calm and confident. That made him even more suspicious. She put the phone to her ear. Yes, this is. Yes, I need you to come to the main lobby immediately. There is a situation that needs your attention. Yes, right now. She hung up and looked at David. He is on his way. David crossed his arms. Good. I want him to hear about your activities. Oh, I am sure you do, the woman said. There was something in her tone that David could not quite identify. Was it amusement? Anger? Something else? They stood there in tense silence, waiting. Other customers had moved away, uncomfortable with the confrontation. Sarah and Tom were whispering to each other. The security guard stood nearby, unsure if he needed to intervene. David felt confident despite the woman's calm demeanor. He had his notebook. He had his evidence. Once the manager heard everything, he would understand why David had taken action. He might even thank David for being so vigilant. The manager's office was at the back of the bank. David could see the door open. The manager stepped out, looking concerned. He walked quickly toward the lobby. As he got closer, David prepared his explanation. He would lay out everything clearly and professionally. He would show his notes. He would explain how this woman had been gathering intelligence on the bank for 2 weeks. But as the manager approached and saw the woman, something strange happened. His face changed. The concern turned into something else. Shock, maybe. Or fear. His steps slowed. The woman did not smile. She just watched the manager walk toward them. David did not understand the manager's reaction. Why did he look so worried? He should be grateful that David had confronted a suspicious person. Is there a problem here? The manager asked, but he was looking at the woman, not at David. Yes, David said quickly, eager to explain. This woman has been... I know who she is, the manager interrupted. His voice sounded strained. David blinked. You do? Yes. The manager looked at David, and there was something in his expression that made David's confidence falter. Could I speak with you privately right now? But I need to report now, the manager said firmly. In my office. He turned to the woman. Ma'am, I apologize for this situation. Could you please wait here for just a moment? The woman nodded. Of course. The manager put his hand on David's shoulder and guided him away from the lobby. David looked back at the woman. She was standing calmly, watching them go. Other employees were staring. Customers were whispering. David felt the first prickle of doubt. Something was wrong. The manager's reaction was all wrong. As they walked toward the office, the manager leaned close and spoke in an urgent whisper. Please tell me you did not just confront who I think you confronted. What do you mean? David asked. I was just doing my job. That woman has been here every day for 2 weeks. I have been documenting her suspicious. The manager stopped walking. He turned to face David fully. His face had gone pale. Do you have any idea who that is? He asked. David stared at the manager, confusion spreading across his face. What do you mean, do I know who she is? That is exactly what I was trying to find out. She has been coming here for 2 weeks, acting suspicious, taking notes. Stop talking, the manager said quietly. His name was Richard Palmer, and he had been managing this branch for 3 years. David had never seen him look so worried. Just stop talking for a minute. Richard ran his hand over his face. He looked around to make sure no one else could hear them. They were standing in the hallway between the lobby and the offices. Through the glass, David could see the woman still standing where they had left her. She was looking down at her phone now, completely calm. Richard, I do not understand, David said. I did the right thing. I noticed suspicious behavior and I confronted it. That is what we are supposed to do. That is what security training teaches us. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked directly at David. That woman you just interrogated in front of customers and staff? That woman you accused of conducting surveillance? That woman you demanded identification from? Yes, David's confidence was fading fast. Something was very wrong. She is the new regional director, Richard said. The words hung in the air between them. David heard them, but they did not make sense at first. Regional director? That could not be right. What? He finally managed to say. Regional director. She oversees 15 branches in this district. Including this one. Including you. Including me. David felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. That is impossible. The regional director is... I thought the regional director was Charles Martin. He retired last month. She is his replacement. She started 3 weeks ago. Richard's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Her name is Ms. Jordan. She is my boss. She is your boss's boss's boss, but why did no one tell us? David felt dizzy. This could not be happening. We were not supposed to know yet. She specifically wanted to visit branches anonymously first. She wanted to observe operations without people changing their behavior because management was watching. It is something new leadership does sometimes. They want to see how things really run. David's mind raced back through the past 2 weeks. Every moment he had watched her. Every note he had taken. Every conversation he had with other employees about how suspicious she was. Oh no, I did not know, David said weakly. How was I supposed to know? You were not supposed to know. That was the whole point. Richard took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. David, do you understand what you just did? You publicly accused a senior executive of planning to rob the bank. You demanded her identification. You interrogated her in front of customers. But her behavior was suspicious. She was taking notes, asking questions about procedures, watching everyone. She was evaluating the branch. Richard said, his whisper becoming urgent. That is what regional directors do. They assess operations, they talk to staff, they review procedures. That is literally her job. David felt sick. He leaned against the wall. How was I supposed to know that? Maybe by not immediately assuming the worst? Maybe by coming to me first instead of confronting a customer? Richard shook his head. What were you thinking? I was thinking I was protecting the bank. I thought I was being a good employee. By profiling a customer, by harassing her. I was not profiling anyone. This had nothing to do with... David stopped. He did not want to finish that sentence. Nothing to do with what? Richard asked, his voice sharp. Nothing to do with the fact that she is a young black woman? Nothing to do with the fact that she did not look like what you expected a bank customer to look like? That is not fair, David protested. I would have been suspicious of anyone acting that way. Would you, though? Richard asked. Would you have tracked a middle-aged white man the same way? Would you have kept a notebook documenting his every move? Would you have confronted him in the lobby and demanded to see his ID? David wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe that he would have. But doubt crept into his mind. Would he have? Or would he have just assumed that person was a businessman, maybe a consultant, someone who had legitimate reasons to be there? I was just doing my job, David said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Your job is to help customers and process transactions. Your job is not to play security guard and interrogate people. Richard looked back toward the lobby. Do you know what she told me when she called me just now? David shook his head. She said, there is a situation that needs your attention. Not your employee is harassing me. Not I am being discriminated against. She stayed professional even while you were accusing her. Do you understand how bad that makes this? What do you mean? I mean, she had every right to lose her temper, to make a scene, to put you in your place right there in the lobby. But she did not. She kept her composure, which means she is probably planning to handle this through official channels, which means this is going to be much worse for you. For all of us. David felt panic rising in his chest. What is going to happen? I do not know yet. But right now I need to go out there and apologize to her. And you need to come with me. I have to apologize? Yes, David, you absolutely have to apologize. And it needs to be sincere. Your job probably depends on it. My job? David's voice cracked. But I did not know who she was. That does not matter. You should not treat any customer that way regardless of who they are. Richard took a breath, trying to calm down. Look, maybe if you apologize, if you take responsibility, maybe this will not go as badly as it could. What do you want me to say? The truth. That you made assumptions. That you were wrong. That you were sorry. Richard started walking back toward the lobby. And David? Do not make excuses. Do not try to justify what you did. Just apologize. They walked back to the lobby together. David's legs felt weak. His heart was pounding. How had this happened? How had he gotten everything so wrong? The woman, Ms. Jordan, was still standing in the same spot. She looked up as they approached. Her expression was neutral, unreadable. Other employees were trying to look busy, but David could tell they were watching. Customers were keeping their distance. The whole bank felt tense. Richard spoke first. "Ms. Jordan, I apologize for this situation. There has been a serious misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Ms. Jordan repeated. "Is that what we are calling this?" "I did not mean—" David started, but Richard shot him a look that said, "Be quiet." "I understand that you have been conducting evaluations of our branch," Richard continued. David was not aware of this. He made an error in judgment. "An error in judgment," Ms. Jordan said. She looked at David. "Is that what you call it?" David's mouth was dry. "Ma'am, I apologize. I did not know who you were. I thought—" "You thought what?" Her voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. "I thought your behavior was suspicious," David admitted. "I thought I was protecting the bank by assuming I was a criminal. I never said—" "You did not have to say it. You made it very clear what you thought." Ms. Jordan looked at Richard. "Has David received training on implicit bias? On customer service? On appropriate conduct?" "Yes, all employees go through those trainings," Richard said quickly. "Interesting." Ms. Jordan turned her attention back to David. "So you received training on not making assumptions about people, on treating all customers with respect, and yet here we are." David did not know what to say. Everything he thought of sounded like an excuse. "Tell me, David," Ms. Jordan continued, "in your 12 years at this bank, how many other customers have you tracked like this? How many other people have you kept notebooks about? How many other customers have you publicly confronted and demanded identification from?" "None," David admitted quietly. "None, just me. The young black woman in nice clothes. Just me asking questions and taking notes. Things that many customers do. Things that business consultants do. Things that mystery shoppers do. Things that, yes, regional directors do." She paused. "But somehow when I did these things you saw a threat." "I made a mistake," David said. "I am sorry. Are you sorry you confronted me? Or are you sorry you were wrong about who I am?" David did not know how to answer that. Ms. Jordan looked around the lobby. "This conversation is not appropriate for the public space. Richard, is your office available?" "Yes, of course," Richard said immediately. "Good, David, you will join us. We need to discuss this situation in detail." She started walking toward the office, then paused and looked back. "And bring your notebook. The one where you documented all my suspicious activities. I want to see exactly what you thought was worth tracking." David's heart sank. The notebook. He had been so proud of that notebook an hour ago. He had thought it was evidence that would prove he was right. Now it felt like evidence of something very different. Evidence of his bias. Evidence of his prejudice. Evidence that would probably cost him his job. Richard gestured for David to follow. As they walked toward the office, David could feel everyone's eyes on him. Sarah looked shocked. Tom looked disappointed. Jennifer would not even meet his eyes. David thought about his 12 years at the bank. His perfect record. His good performance reviews. His pride in his work. It was all about to come crashing down because of 2 weeks of watching someone who never did anything actually wrong. As they entered the office and Richard closed the door, David realized something. Ms. Jordan had not lost her temper. She had not yelled. She had not made threats. She had stayed calm and professional the entire time, which somehow made everything worse, because it meant she did not need to be angry. She had the power and authority to handle this properly, through official channels. She did not need to argue with him in the lobby. She could simply document what happened and let the consequences follow. And David knew, with terrible certainty, that the consequences were going to be severe. Richard closed the office door, and the three of them stood in heavy silence. Ms. Jordan walked to the window and looked out at the branch floor. David could see employees trying not to stare at the closed office door. Word was probably spreading fast about what had just happened. "Sit down, both of you," Ms. Jordan said without turning around. Richard and David sat in the chairs across from Richard's desk. Ms. Jordan remained standing, still looking out at the branch. The power dynamic was clear. This was her meeting, her terms. After what felt like forever, she turned to face them. Her expression was controlled, but David could see the disappointment in her eyes. "David, put your notebook on the desk," she said. David's hand shook slightly as he pulled out the small notebook and placed it on the desk. It sat there between them like evidence at a trial, which David realized was exactly what it was. Ms. Jordan picked it up and began flipping through the pages. Her face remained neutral as she read, but David felt more ashamed with each page she turned. He could see his own handwriting documenting her every move. 9:30 arrival. Designer bag. Taking notes. Watching staff. Looking at security cameras. This is very detailed, Miss Jordan said finally. You put a lot of effort into this. I thought I was being thorough, David said quietly. Thorough in what? Building a case against me? She set the notebook down. Let me tell you who I am and why I was here since you never bothered to simply ask. David felt his face grow hot. My name is Alicia Jordan. I was promoted to regional director 4 weeks ago. Before that, I was an area manager for another district. Before that, I spent 8 years as a branch manager. Before that, I was a teller just like you. I have worked in banking for 15 years. I earned my MBA while working full-time. I have managed branches with over 50 employees and budgets in the millions. She walked around to the front of the desk and leaned against it, looking directly at David. When I took this position, I decided to do something different. Instead of announcing myself and doing formal inspections, I wanted to see how branches really operate. I wanted to understand the customer experience. I wanted to observe how staff interact when they do not know management is watching. It is a technique called anonymous evaluation, and it is becoming more common in the banking industry. Richard nodded, looking miserable. David said nothing. I visited 15 branches over 3 weeks. I spent time in each one. I asked questions. I observed procedures. I took notes on what worked well and what needed improvement. At some branches, people were friendly and helpful. At others, service was lacking. But do you know what never happened at any of the other 14 branches? She paused, waiting for an answer. Neither man spoke. No one tracked me. No one documented my movements. No one confronted me. No one demanded my identification. No one accused me of planning a crime. Her voice was still calm, but each word landed like a hammer. Only here. Only at this branch. Only with you, David. I made a mistake, David said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. Yes, you did. But I want to understand what kind of mistake. So I'm going to ask you some questions and I want honest answers. She crossed her arms. What specifically made you suspicious of me? David struggled to find words. You were here every day. You asked a lot of questions. You took notes. You watched everything. And if a middle-aged white man in a business suit did those same things, would you have tracked him? David wanted to say yes, but he could not, because he knew the truth now, even if he had not admitted it to himself before. I do not know. I think you do know. I think you would have assumed he was a consultant or an auditor, or a business owner researching banking services. But when you saw me, a young black woman, you did not imagine any of those possibilities. Did you? David looked down at his hands. No. What did you imagine? The question hung in the air. David did not want to answer, but he knew he had to. I thought you might be planning a robbery, or some kind of fraud. Based on what evidence? Based on your behavior? No, Ms. Jordan said firmly. Based on your assumptions about my behavior. Because my behavior was neutral. Professional observation. Standard questions. Normal curiosity. But you interpreted it as threatening. Why? David felt tears of shame prickling his eyes. He had never cried at work in his life, but he felt close to it now. Because I judged you. I saw you and I made assumptions about who you were and what you might do. And I was wrong. You were wrong, Ms. Jordan agreed. But it is worse than just being wrong. You let those assumptions guide your actions for 2 weeks. You did not question yourself. You did not consider other explanations. You built an entire narrative in your head about who I was, and you convinced yourself it was true. You even got other employees involved in your suspicions. She picked up the notebook again. You have notes here about conversations with coworkers. Sarah told you I asked about procedures. Jennifer told you I asked personal questions. Tom told you I wanted to know about busy times. You collected all this information and used it to confirm your theory. That is called confirmation bias, David. You saw what you expected to see. Richard spoke up for the first time since they sat down. Ms. Jordan, I take responsibility for this as well. I should have informed my staff about your visits. I should have— No, Ms. Jordan interrupted. You were following my instructions. I specifically asked branch managers not to tell their staff. I wanted authentic observations. This is not your fault, Richard, although we will discuss some concerns I have about this branch's culture. Richard nodded, looking relieved but still worried. Ms. Jordan turned her attention back to David. Here is what troubles me most. I have been in banking long enough to experience discrimination many times. I have been followed in stores. I have been questioned about whether I can afford things. I have had people assume I am less educated or qualified than I am. It happens. I hate it, but it happens. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What makes this particularly serious is that you are in a position of trust. You interact with customers every day. You make judgments about them, about their transactions, about whether they seem legitimate. And if you brought this level of bias to observing me, how does that affect how you treat other customers of color? David had not thought about that. But now he did, and it made him feel sick. How many times had he been a little more suspicious of certain customers? How many times had he asked for extra identification when he maybe did not need to? How many times had he questioned transactions more thoroughly, based on who was making them? I do not think I have treated other customers badly, he said. But even as he spoke, he was not sure it was true. You might not think so. But bias works in subtle ways. It affects our judgments without us realizing it. That is why we have training. That is why we have policies about treating all customers equally. But training and policies only work if people are willing to examine their own assumptions. Ms. Jordan walked to the other side of the room, giving them space. I have been doing this job for a month. In that time, I have visited 15 branches. I have observed hundreds of interactions. I have seen good practices and bad. But what I saw today was different. Today I saw explicit discrimination. I saw an employee harass a customer based on unfounded suspicions. And I have to decide what to do about it. David's stomach dropped. Here it came. He was going to be fired. His career was over. 12 years of work, gone because of 2 weeks of terrible judgment. I could recommend your immediate termination, Ms. Jordan said. And honestly, that would be justified. You profiled me. You tracked me without cause. You publicly confronted and accused me. Any one of those things could be grounds for dismissal. David waited for the but. There had to be a but, right? But I have been thinking about this over the past hour, since I first realized what was happening. And I keep coming back to something. You are not the only one with these biases. You are just the one who acted on them so openly. She looked at Richard. Your branch has a culture problem. I have observed it over the past 2 weeks. Staff make comments about customers. There is judgment about who belongs here and who does not. It is subtle, but it is there. David is a symptom of a bigger issue. Richard looked shocked. I had no idea. That is part of the problem. These things often go unnoticed by people who are not affected by them. But I noticed. I heard the way certain customers were talked about. I saw the different levels of service provided. And now I know it needs to be addressed. She returned to the desk and looked at David. So here is what is going to happen. David, you are suspended immediately pending a full investigation. That investigation will include interviews with staff and a review of your customer interactions over the past year. Depending on what we find, you may face termination. At minimum, you will face serious consequences. David nodded, unable to speak. Richard, this branch will undergo mandatory training on implicit bias and customer service. All staff, including you. I will also be implementing new oversight procedures and regular check-ins. We need to change the culture here. Yes, ma'am, Richard said. Whatever you recommend. I will be writing a detailed report about this incident. It will go into David's file and will be shared with HR. If David remains with the company after the investigation, he will be on probation. Any further issues and he is done. Is that clear? Yes, David managed to say. Ms. Jordan picked up her leather folder. David, you need to gather your personal items and leave the premises today. HR will contact you about the investigation process. Richard, I need you to make an announcement to staff about what happened and about the upcoming training. Do not sugarcoat it. They need to understand that this behavior is not acceptable. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back at David. I want you to understand something. I am not doing this because I am angry, though I have every right to be. I am doing this because discrimination has no place in banking. Our customers come from all backgrounds, all races, all economic levels. They all deserve to be treated with respect. If we cannot provide that, we have failed at our most basic mission. David felt tears finally escape down his cheeks. I am sorry. I am truly sorry. I believe you are sorry now, but you should have been sorry 2 weeks ago the first time you looked at me and made assumptions. Ms. Jordan opened the door. Learn from this, David. If you get another chance, do better. She left the office, closing the door quietly behind her. David and Richard sat in silence. Finally, Richard spoke. "You need to clean out your desk. I will escort you." As David stood on shaking legs, he thought about everything he had lost. His job was probably gone. His reputation was destroyed. His coworkers would never look at him the same way. And all because he had looked at a woman and decided, based on nothing but his own prejudice, that she was a threat. He had thought he was protecting the bank. But really, he had just revealed his own biases, and now everyone knew exactly what he was. 3 days after the incident, David sat in a conference room at the bank's regional headquarters. The room was cold and formal, with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Across from him sat 2 HR representatives and Ms. Jordan. A woman from HR named Patricia led the meeting. "Thank you for coming in, David," Patricia said, though they all knew it was not optional. "We have been conducting our investigation into the incident that occurred on Monday. We have interviewed staff members at your branch and reviewed your employment record. Today we want to hear your perspective." David had barely slept in 3 days. He had replayed the confrontation in his mind hundreds of times. Each time he saw more clearly how wrong he had been. Each time he felt more ashamed. "I know what I did was wrong," David began. His voice was rough from lack of sleep. "I have spent the last 3 days thinking about nothing else." "We are not just interested in whether you know it was wrong," Patricia said. "We need to understand why it happened and whether it represents a pattern of behavior." The other HR representative, a man named James, opened a folder. "We have reviewed your 12 years with the bank. Your performance reviews have been consistently good. You have had no formal complaints. You received customer service awards in 2019 and 2022. On paper, you are a model employee." "So what happened?" Patricia asked. "How does a model employee end up tracking and confronting a customer based on unfounded suspicions?" David took a breath. He had prepared for this. He had thought carefully about what to say, but preparation did not make it any easier. "I made assumptions," he said. "I saw Ms. Jordan and I decided she did not belong. I did not think that consciously. I did not wake up that day and decide to discriminate. But that is what I did." Ms. Jordan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Walk us through your thinking." "The first day you saw me, what went through your mind?" David forced himself to meet her eyes. "I thought you looked expensive. Your clothes, your bag, and you were young. I wondered what you were doing at our branch. We do not get many young people dressed like that." "Did you wonder that when young white people in nice clothes came in?" Ms. Jordan asked. "No," David admitted. "I usually assumed they were from wealthy families or had good jobs. But you did not assume that about me." "No. I assumed something was wrong. That you did not really have the money you appeared to have, or that you were trying to trick us somehow." The words hung heavy in the room. Saying them out loud made David realize how terrible they sounded, how racist they were, even though he had not used a racial slur or said anything explicitly racist. Patricia made notes on her paper. "When did you decide to start documenting Ms. Jordan's activities?" "The second day she came in, after I saw her taking notes on her phone. I thought she was recording information about the bank's security." "Why did you think that specifically?" James asked. "Because she was paying so much attention to details. Where the cameras were, how many staff we had, the layout of the branch. Things that many people notice," Ms. Jordan pointed out. "Things that anyone observant would see. But you interpreted it as threatening." "Why?" David struggled to answer. "I thought I was being professional. I thought I was protecting the bank. But the truth is I was scared. Scared of something I could not even name. I saw you and some part of my brain said danger, even though you never did anything dangerous." "That part of your brain was your bias," Ms. Jordan said. "That was years of assumptions and stereotypes telling you that a young black woman in a bank must be up to something. Even though logically you knew that made no sense." "Yes," David said quietly. Patricia leaned forward. "Did you share your suspicions with other employees?" "Yes, I talked to Robert, Sarah, Jennifer, and Tom about it. I showed them my notes. I told them I thought she was suspicious, and what did they say? Most of them agreed with me. Few thought I was being too paranoid. But no one told me to stop watching her. No one said I was wrong to be suspicious." "That concerns us," James said. "It suggests this is not just one employee with a problem. It suggests a broader culture issue at the branch." Ms. Jordan nodded. "Which is why we are implementing changes branch-wide. But right now we are focused on you, David. We need to determine if you can continue with this company. David felt his throat tighten. I know I do not deserve another chance, but I am asking for one anyway. I want to learn from this. I want to be better. Why should we believe you can change? Patricia asked. You went through all our standard training. You knew the policies, yet you still did this. Because I did not really understand before. I thought I was not racist because I never used slurs. I never joined hate groups. I have friends of different races. But that is not enough. I see that now. He paused, trying to find the right words. I realize that racism is not just about what you say or what you consciously believe. It is about the assumptions you make. The split-second judgments. The different standards you apply to different people without even realizing it. Ms. Jordan studied him carefully. What made you realize that? Watching a video my wife showed me. After I told her what happened, she made me watch this lecture about implicit bias. About how our brains make quick judgments based on patterns we have learned. And I recognized myself in every example. He looked at Ms. Jordan. The lecturer talked about an experiment where they showed people pictures and asked them to quickly categorize them. And people consistently associated black faces with negative words and white faces with positive words. Even people who said they were not racist. Even black participants themselves sometimes showed the same bias. Because it is not about what we want to believe. It is about what society has taught us. So you are blaming society? James asked skeptically. No, I am responsible for my actions. Society gave me biases, but I chose to act on them. I chose not to question my assumptions. I chose to build a case against Ms. Jordan instead of just asking her what she was doing. That was my choice. Patricia made more notes. Let me ask you something specific. We reviewed transactions you handled over the past year. We found that you requested additional identification from customers of color, 32% more often than from white customers. Can you explain that? David felt sick. He had not realized anyone would look at that level of detail. I did not know I was doing that. That is the problem, Ms. Jordan said. Discrimination does not always come from conscious hatred. Often it comes from unconscious bias that affects thousands of small decisions. Asking for extra ID, taking a little longer to approve a transaction, being less friendly or helpful, those small things add up. We also found, James continued, that 3 customers filed informal complaints about you over the years. Nothing that went into your official record, but comments to management about feeling unwelcome or treated with suspicion. All 3 were customers of color. David had not known about those complaints. Richard had never told him. I never meant to make anyone feel that way. Intent does not erase impact, Ms. Jordan said. Those customers felt discriminated against. Whether you meant to or not, you made them feel unwelcome in their own bank. The room fell silent. David stared at the table, absorbing the full weight of what he had done. Not just the confrontation with Ms. Jordan, but years of subtle discrimination against customers who deserved better. Here is what troubles me most, Ms. Jordan said. You had opportunities to stop yourself. When you first started tracking me, you could have questioned why you felt suspicious. When other employees expressed doubt, you could have listened. When you decided to confront me, you could have talked to your manager first. But at every step you chose to continue. Why? Because I was convinced I was right. I had built this whole story in my head and I believed it. I thought I was the hero protecting the bank. I did not realize I was the villain harassing an innocent person. And if that person had not been the regional director, Patricia asked, if it had been a regular customer, would you have learned this lesson? The question hit David hard. Would he have? Or would he have continued believing he was right? Would he have felt justified in his suspicions even if they led nowhere? I do not know, he admitted. Maybe not. Maybe I needed to be wrong in such a public, undeniable way before I would really examine myself. Ms. Jordan stood and walked to the window, just as she had in Richard's office. I have been thinking about this situation constantly. Part of me wants to make an example of you, to show that discrimination has severe consequences. You deserve to be fired, David, you know that. Yes, David said. I do. But another part of me wonders if firing you is the easy way out. You lose your job, we move on, and nothing really changes. You do not learn. The bank does not learn. We just sweep the problem away without addressing why it happened. She turned to face him. So I have a proposal. I have discussed this with HR, and they have agreed to consider it, but it depends entirely on you and your willingness to do difficult work. David sat up straighter. I will do whatever you ask. You are suspended for 1 month without pay. During that time, you will attend intensive training on implicit bias, cultural competency, and anti-racism, not the standard 2-hour seminar. Real, deep training that will be uncomfortable and challenging. You will also work with a counselor who specializes in helping people confront their biases. I will do it, David said immediately. I am not finished. When you return, you will be on probation for 1 year. During that time, your transactions will be monitored for patterns of bias. You will have monthly meetings with HR to discuss your progress. 1 complaint, 1 incident, 1 sign that you have not changed, and you are done. Is that clear? Yes. You will also participate in training other employees. You will share your story. You will talk about what you did wrong and what you learned. It will be humiliating. People will judge you. You will have to own your mistakes publicly. Are you willing to do that? David hesitated. That part scared him more than anything. Admitting his failures to his coworkers. Being the example of what not to do. But he knew he deserved it. Yes, I will do it. Ms. Jordan looked at Patricia and James. They nodded. Then we have an agreement. But David, understand this. I am not giving you this chance because I am forgiving or because I feel sorry for you. I am doing this because I believe the bank needs to address these issues systematically. And your case can help with that. You are not getting a favor. You are being given an opportunity to be part of the solution. Do not waste it. I will not, David promised. Thank you. I know I do not deserve this chance. You are right. You do not. So prove that my decision was not a mistake. The meeting ended. As David left the building, he felt exhausted and overwhelmed. A month of suspension meant financial stress. The training would be emotionally draining. The probation meant living with constant scrutiny. Sharing his story meant public humiliation, but he was grateful, because he still had a chance to make things right. A chance to become the person he should have been all along. A chance to look at customers and see people, not threats. He pulled out his phone and called his wife. They are giving me another chance, he said when she answered. That is good, she said. Now do not waste it, I will not. I promise I will not. As he walked to his car, David thought about Ms. Jordan. She could have destroyed his career. Instead, she had given him a path forward. Not an easy path, but a possible one. He would take it. He would do the work. And he would spend the rest of his career making sure no one else had to experience what he put Ms. Jordan through. It was the least he could do. 6 months later, David stood in front of 20 bank employees at a training session. His hands were sweaty. His heart raced. Even after doing this presentation 12 times at different branches, it never got easier. My name is David Mitchell, he began, and I am here to tell you about the worst mistake of my career. The room was silent. Some people looked curious. Others looked uncomfortable. Everyone knew why he was there. The story had spread through the entire district. David Mitchell, the teller who profiled the regional director. 6 months ago, I saw a young black woman walk into my branch. She was well-dressed and professional. She came to the bank every day for 2 weeks. She asked questions, took notes, and observed our operations, and I decided she must be planning something criminal. He paused, letting that sink in. I did not just wonder about her. I tracked her. I kept a notebook documenting her every move. I talked to coworkers about how suspicious she was. And finally, I confronted her in the middle of the lobby and demanded to see her identification. A few people shifted in their seats. David could see recognition on some faces. They understood the implications. That woman was Alicia Jordan, our regional director. She was conducting anonymous evaluations. She was doing her job. But I did not see a professional doing her job. I saw a threat, and I want to talk about why. For the next hour, David walked them through his thought process. He showed them the actual notebook he had kept, with all his observations and assumptions. He explained how confirmation bias worked, how he had interpreted everything Ms. Jordan did as suspicious because he had already decided she was suspicious. He talked about implicit bias, about the unconscious associations that affect everyone. He shared the statistics about how he had treated customers of color differently, even though he never realized it. He discussed the complaints that customers had made, complaints he never knew about. I thought I was not racist, David said. I had black friends. I never used racial slurs. I believed in equality. But those things do not make you not racist. They just mean you are not openly, obviously racist. The subtle racism, the kind that lives in unconscious assumptions that is harder to see and harder to fight. After the presentation, there was time for questions. A young teller raised her hand. "Do you still work at the same branch?" "No," David said. "I was transferred to a different location as part of my probation. Ms. Jordan thought it would be better for everyone. But I still see some of my old coworkers. Most of them do not talk to me anymore." An older man asked, "How did your family react?" David took a breath. "My wife was disappointed but supportive. She helped me understand what I had done wrong. My kids were embarrassed. My teenage daughter asked me if I was racist, and I had to say yes in ways I never recognized. That was hard." "Do you think you have changed?" asked a woman in the back. "Yes and no," David answered honestly. "I am more aware of my biases now. I catch myself making assumptions and I question them. But the biases are still there. I still have split-second reactions that I have to consciously override. The difference is now I recognize them and fight against them. Before I just acted on them without thinking." When the session ended, Ms. Jordan, who had been sitting in the back, came forward. She did this at every training David conducted. It was part of their agreement. "Thank you, David," she said formally. "Does anyone have questions for me?" Several hands went up. A young woman asked, "Why did you give him another chance?" Ms. Jordan considered the question. "Because firing him would have been easy. It would have felt satisfying, but it would not have changed anything. David would have left believing he was treated unfairly. Other employees would not have learned the lesson. The bank would not have addressed the deeper issues." She looked at David. This way, David has to confront what he did every day. He has to do the hard work of changing. And his story helps others recognize their own biases before they make the same mistakes. "Do you trust him now?" someone asked. "Trust is earned over time," Ms. Jordan said. "David is doing the work. He is showing up. He is being honest about his failures. That is a good start. But full trust will take longer." After everyone left, David packed up his materials. Ms. Jordan approached him. "You did well today," she said. "You were honest and vulnerable. That is what makes these sessions effective." "Thank you," David said, "but it does not get easier." "It should not get easier. The discomfort is important. It reminds you why this matters," David nodded. 6 months into his probation, he had learned a lot. The intensive training had been brutal. Sitting in a room for 8 hours a day, confronting his prejudices, hearing from people who had experienced discrimination. There were days he wanted to quit. Days he got angry and defensive. But his counselor, Dr. Williams, had helped him work through it. "Defensiveness is natural," Dr. Williams had told him. "When we hear we have hurt people, our instinct is to protect ourselves. But you have to sit with the discomfort. You have to listen to the pain you caused." The monthly HR meetings were difficult too. They reviewed his transactions, looking for patterns. In the first 2 months, they found several instances where David had been harder on customers of color. Nothing as extreme as what he did to Ms. Jordan, but small differences in tone, speed of service, number of questions asked. "I am trying," David had told them, frustrated. "I really am trying." "We know," the HR representative said. "But unconscious bias does not disappear just because you want it to. It takes constant vigilance. You have to actively work against your instincts until new instincts form." Slowly, it was working. By month 4, the patterns were less obvious. By month 6, they were minimal. David had developed strategies. When a customer approached, he took a breath and consciously reminded himself to treat everyone the same. He used checklists to make sure he asked for the same information from everyone. He smiled at every customer, made eye contact, used the same friendly tone. It felt mechanical at first, forced. But over time, it became more natural. He started seeing customers as individuals rather than categories. He started noticing things he had missed before, like how some customers seemed nervous or uncomfortable, and he realized he might have contributed to that feeling. Back at his branch, things had changed too. Ms. Jordan had been serious about addressing the culture problem. Every employee had gone through mandatory training. The branch manager, Richard, had participated in leadership coaching. New policies were in place about customer service and reporting concerns properly. Not everyone was happy about it. Some employees thought the changes were unnecessary. "We are being punished for one person's mistake," Tom had complained during one training session. But Ms. Jordan had been firm. This was not one person's mistake. This was a symptom of a larger problem. David acted on his biases, but others shared those biases. Others agreed with him. The culture here allowed this to happen. She had shared her own notes from her 2 weeks at the branch. Observations about how staff talked about certain customers. Comments that seemed innocent but revealed underlying biases. The slow service given to some customers versus the efficient service given to others. You may not think you are discriminating, she had told them, but the impact is the same. Customers feel it. They feel unwelcome. They feel judged. And that is unacceptable. The training was ongoing. Monthly sessions on different topics. Guest speakers who had experienced discrimination. Case studies and role-playing exercises. It was time-consuming and sometimes awkward, but results were showing. Customer satisfaction scores had actually increased. Complaints had decreased. Employees reported feeling more confident in handling diverse customers. The branch was becoming a better place to work and to do business. For David personally, the hardest part was not the training or the monitoring. It was facing his coworkers. Sarah barely spoke to him. Jennifer was polite but distant. Tom openly said he thought David had gotten what he deserved. You embarrassed us, Tom had said one day in the break room. You made us all look bad. I know, David had said. I am sorry. Sorry does not fix it. That story is following this branch everywhere. People think we are all like you. That stung, but David understood. His actions had consequences beyond himself. The branch's reputation had taken a hit. Other employees had to work harder to prove they were not biased. It was not fair to them, but slowly some relationships were healing. Sarah had started talking to him again after he gave his presentation at another branch, and she heard feedback from employees who attended. They said you were really honest, she told him, that you did not make excuses. I am trying to do better, David said. I know. I can see that. Jennifer took longer to come around. But one day, 4 months into his probation, she came to him with a question. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I have biases too? Like I never tracked anyone or anything. But do you think I treat people differently without realizing it? It was a brave question. David respected her for asking it. Probably we all do. The training explained that it is not about being a bad person. It is about recognizing the assumptions we all carry. How do I know if I am doing it? Pay attention. Notice your thoughts when different customers approach. Notice if you feel more relaxed with some and more guarded with others. Notice if you ask different questions or use a different tone. Once you start paying attention, you will see patterns. Jennifer had thought about that. The next week she came back. You were right. I noticed I smile more at some customers than others. And it is not random. There is a pattern. What are you going to do about it? What you do? Force myself to smile at everyone. Use the same tone. Treat everyone exactly the same until it becomes natural. These conversations gave David hope. Maybe his mistake, as painful as it was, could lead to real change. Not just for him, but for others too. Ms. Jordan continued her oversight of the district. She visited branches regularly, sometimes announced, sometimes not. She met with employees at all levels. She reviewed data about customer service patterns and transaction handling. When she found problems, she addressed them swiftly. We are creating a new culture, she told managers at a quarterly meeting. A culture where everyone feels welcome, where bias is recognized and challenged, where employees understand that inclusion is not just a buzzword, it is a fundamental part of how we operate. Some branches embraced the changes enthusiastically. Others resisted. Ms. Jordan was patient but firm. This is not optional, she made clear. This is the standard we are holding ourselves to. If you cannot meet it, you should work somewhere else. By the 6-month mark, measurable changes were evident across the district. Customer satisfaction scores were up 12%. Employee engagement scores had improved. Turnover had decreased. And most importantly, complaints about discriminatory treatment had dropped by 60%. David's probation would last another 6 months. He knew the scrutiny would continue. He knew he would keep giving presentations, keep sharing his story, keep facing the consequences of his actions. But he was okay with that. Because every time he gave a presentation and saw someone nod in recognition, every time an employee came to him with questions about their own biases, every time he treated a customer with genuine respect regardless of who they were, he was making up for what he did. He would never fully repair the damage. Ms. Jordan would probably never completely trust him. Some coworkers would never forgive him. That was his burden to carry. but he could make sure his mistake led to something better. He could help others avoid the same errors. He could be part of creating a banking system where everyone truly was treated equally. On his way home that evening, David stopped by the grocery store. A young black woman in business attire stood in front of him in line. 6 months ago, he might have watched her carefully. He might have wondered if her credit card was really hers. He might have made assumptions. Now he just saw another person buying groceries after work, just like him. Just trying to get through her day, just deserving of basic respect and dignity. It was a small moment, a tiny victory, but it mattered. He was learning, still learning, always learning, and maybe eventually he would become the person he should have been all along, the person who saw people, not profiles, who responded with curiosity, not suspicion, who treated everyone, truly everyone, with the same level of respect and kindness. He was not there yet. But he was on his way, and he would keep working at it for the rest of his career, for the rest of his life, because that was what he owed Ms. Jordan, the customers he had treated poorly, and himself. To be better. To do better. Every single day,